Shalom, and welcome to Tov, the Jewish News Channel. My name is Ruchi Avital, and we have with us today Dr. Harael Khoreb, who is a historian and expert on Palestinian affairs, a research fellow at the Moshe Dayan Center for the Study of Middle Eastern and African Affairs. And I'd like to ask you, in wake of the horrific events of October 7th, how does Palestinian society view these events? Palestinian society, I think we can divide into three parts. Gaza, we know what they think. Judea and Samaria, and Israeli Arabs, who identify, at least a large part of them, as Palestinians. So let's start with Judea and Samaria. How do they view the events of October 7th?
Well, that's a really well-needed division between all these groups that you mentioned, because you can really see significant differences. So let's start with Judea and Samaria. Most of them, 80%, according to Khalil Shkaki's survey poll, support, hail the events of October 7, and the reason I'm saying events is because they don't think of it as a massacre. They don't believe the stories about it as a massacre. 93% of them never saw any video from that horrible day. So they believe what they want to believe, which is a great victory for the Palestinians, for Hamas, occupying the part of Israel southern settlements. And this is what they choose to focus on, because I believe that if they would want to hear different narratives and to be exposed to other things, materials which are not comfortable to them, they would have done that, but they don't. And as far as it depends on them, it was just a military sort of an action, not a massacre, horrible, with mutilating, raping, burning, killing so many innocents. As for the Arab Israelis, which, as you said, some of them identified as Palestinian. We can talk, by the way, that's a good opportunity to talk about if they really do they define themselves as Palestinian. So before the war, we could talk about 14 to 17% of Israeli Arabs who identified as Palestinian, periods. Most of them identified as Israeli Arabs or as Arabs, and you had at least the same amount of, or percentage of Israeli Arabs who identified as Israelis. So there's no advantage in this politically correct sort of idea or notion or terminology that we should call them Palestinians. That's to begin with. We see that 80% of them, it's like a mirror image of what is going on Judea and Samaria. 80% of them are against what happened on October 7th, because they are far more exposed to the Israeli narrative, far more exposed to those videos. They are fully aware of the fact that there were something like, if I recall right, something like 20 Israeli Arabs who were murdered there. Some of them were abducted, and they are much more aware of it, and they behave accordingly. For example, we saw from the very beginning of the war, we saw all sorts of statements, actions of support of the Israelis. For example, this bicycle shop who gave bicycles for the Southerners, for Israelis from the South. But we saw also this 20%, which, by the way, it's always the same problematic 20%, in which, in this 20%, which is not really, fully Israeli in its identity, you have the most extreme 5% within it, okay, who are, fully against us, and for Hamas. So you also had kind of reflections of these 5% too, because this bicycle shop that I just mentioned was burned by extremists. So I would say, but still, generally speaking, the Israeli Arabs are much more loyal, aware, and of course denounce what happened on October 7. As for the Gaza Strip, that's a totally different.
Before you get to the Gaza Strip, I'd like to ask you one more question about Israeli Arabs. I mean, in May 2021, we had the riots, and we all remember what happened there in Lod and in Akko and other places, and how Jews were attacked there. So how do you explain this disparity between what you just said and what happened in 2021?
Well, it is those notorious 20% that I've just mentioned. Even in terms of numerical measures, you would see that the rioters were several thousands, and if you go to the hardcore, you will probably find, I don't know, several hundreds. It's not that I'm saying that it's not important. I think it was an extremely worrying thing and eruption, and I thought that Israel should take care of it both in an iron fist, but at the same time to try to understand what are the social reasons for it and the political reasons for it, and try to fix that if that's possible. For example, we know about a large number of Israeli Arabs, usually youth, that are unemployed. That, of course, is a gateway for bad things. But still, when we're talking about the majority is not there. Is not in those extreme areas. But we find them all the time. That these 20% problematic 20%. These are the Balad people. These are the northern branch of the Islamic movement people. These are the most problematic elements within the Israeli Arab society, and they are extreme. And yes, we need to pay attention to this phenomena and to try to resolve it in various ways, actually.
Okay, we'll get back to that. First, tell me about Gaza, about the population in Gaza, how they divide up.
Well, before the war, we can definitely talk about the large support, majority support of Hamas, and even not if Hamas directly, Hamas agenda generally, namely jihadist agenda. Khalil Skaki poll showed on September last year that 44%, not less than 44%, supported Hamas. If you compare it to other data that we have, for example, the number of employees within the Hamas infrastructure, which is something like, let's say, 65,000, and multiply it by 10 for each family, of breadwinners that are, getting their salaries from Hamas, you get to something around 650,000 people who are.
Does that include UNRWA? Does that include UNRWA?
That not even includes UNRWA. That even not includes UNRWA, which we know is also problematic. And this is a very important point. We should understand that, at the end of the day, when you are the rule in a certain place, the circles of influence that you have are far more broad than the let's say the basic areas in which you control, like UNRWA, for example. We know that Hamas operatives combined into UNRWA as teachers, as workers. We heard about those 12 terrorists who were employees of UNRWA. We know about the WhatsApp group of 3,000 UNRWA members that were exchanging views which could fit ISIS, Al Qaeda, think about the most radical group that you can think of. And these were UNRWA teachers, the people who groom the next generation, so we can understand what kind of grooming those students received. So
we
at the end
we heard about at least 2 UNRWA teachers who were actually holding hostages in their homes. So, yeah.
Yeah. This is certainly an organization that for a very long time is mainly doing harm against of anything good, even in regardless to Israel. But in terms of the future that it promises to or cultivating in the Gaza Strip, and within those refugees camps, it does more harm than good. However, it will, if let's say the measures that we see today by those countries that are stopping the funding or suspending the funding for UNRWA, something will need to replace UNRWA. That needs to be part of this new deal that we're offering the Gaza Strip, because they are fulfilling a certain void that will need to be filled. However, I hope this void will be filled with new actors that will be much more kind of a Marshall Plan kind of actors, rather than the old, the same old, same old.
In other words, something that would involve some kind of denazification of Gaza from Hamas influences.
Absolutely. I think we cannot really forgo any less than full de-Hamasization of the Gaza Strip. It is possible. It is doable. It is possible to topple down Hamas. It is possible to eradicate Hamas. And all these talks about Hamas is an idea, and therefore you cannot topple it down, are just, I think that the people who are saying it they belong to the same kind of school that told us that Hamas is deterred and quiet will be answered with quiet. It's the same kind of conception school, and I think we need to change, the disc, as we say in Hebrew, and to switch the disc and to think about this whole thing in a much more radical way, that will make us understand, and the rest of the world, of course, that Israel cannot forego a full de-Hamasization of the Gaza Strip after a full destruction of the organization. Listen, I don't mind, as far as I'm concerned, destroying 95% of Hamas is a destruction of Hamas. 95%, okay, of course we will have all these guerrillas that will try to harm our forces, but still it has nothing to compare with the army of terror Hamas was on October 7. It's uncomparable, and therefore it is possible, absolutely. And I think that Israel should pursue this goal without any hesitation. Let me just add you another data, because we were talking about 44% who supported Hamas at the beginning of the war, but on that, of course, we need to add the people who support the Islamic Jihad, the people who support the popular committees, which are also jihadi kind of organization. So at the end of the day, it sums up in much more than 50% who supported these things. Let us not forget, and you know what, Ruchi, this is extremely important. And I know it's extremely important because when I talk to colleagues around the world, and they ask us, do you do enough, to avoid hurting civilians? So I say, absolutely. You can just read John Spencer, the chair of urban warfare in West Point Academy, saying that no army did ever before what the IDF is doing in the Gaza Strip to avoid including the US Army, to avoid the human casualties. However, I'm telling them, however, I'm telling them, it is extremely important to emphasize that we are extremely angry about those civilians, and we have good reasons for that. We have good reasons for that because they abducted, they killed, about 1,000 of them killed our civilians, raped our women, burned those houses, participated those atrocities. And then, of course, any kidnappee will many of them told us actually how they were abused and tortured by the civilians while they were marched at the street of the Gaza Strip, spitted on and beaten, and even to the extent that Hamas had to operatives needed to protect those kidnapped, and not to mention all those criminal family who abducted Israelis and sold them as if they were slaves in the market of the I don't know, the early 19th century or something. Sold them to Hamas and to the Islamic Jihad. These were all civilians, all of them, and therefore, yes, we are mad about them, but still we are, a democratic country acting according to those norms. But it needs to be said, the civilians in the Gaza Strip needs to be a full part of this de-Hamasization that we're planning for the Gaza Strip.
What about the UNRWA schools in Judea and Samaria? And in East Jerusalem, there's an UNRWA school, at least one that I know of.
Yeah. Well, I think the whole body called the UNRWA should be revised. Let's
dismantled.
Dismantled and while providing something else according to new categories. There's no reason, for example, when I'm talking about categories, there's no reason that we will have 4.5 million Palestinian registered refugees today, because they're not refugees. So many of them are not refugees today.
As we all know, they are the only population of refugees in the world that pass down their refugee status to their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. My parents were refugees after World War II. Millions and millions of people in Europe were refugees after World War II. None of them are refugees anymore. And this is the only population of refugees that is growing rather than shrinking. And it's thanks to UNRWA, this organization that was created for that very purpose, to perpetuate the refugee status of Palestinians, which can only be resolved in one way, and that is the destruction of the state of Israel. So this is, the very existence of UNRWA and Israel allowing UNRWA to operate from within Israeli territories, as it does in East Jerusalem and also in Judea and Samaria, and certainly in Gaza. This is really something that is difficult to understand, difficult to comprehend how we are participating, even passively, in this in the enabling of this organization, which exists to destroy the state of Israel.
I fully agree, and I would even add that you've mentioned your parents. And of course, we can think about so many other actually refugees, okay, after the Holocaust, after the Second World War. But, even Mizrahi Jews, okay, 800,000 of them who had to leave their homes as a direct result of the 1948 war, okay? Some of them were before experiencing massacres, for example, in Aden, in Yemen in 1947-48, in Egypt, in Baghdad, in so many other. They were all refugees, hundred thousands of them. So many of them seek refuge in Israel, in Israel in its first years. What about them? They are not refugees? Did we not put them in refugees like camps at the beginning until, of course, we could, manage or they could manage for a better place to live in? So yes, I fully agree. There is something really which is really unfair in the way that the whole issue, as of course as part of the Israeli-Palestinian or something that derives out of it, is being taken care of and addressed as if they are unique, as if the Palestinians are such a unique phenomena that you need to maintain UNRWA for for the foreseen future. It's absurd.
It's absurd. I agree with you 100%. It seems as if it doesn't seem, it is, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is a zero-sum game. There is no way, if it continues in the same direction as it has been going until now, there is no way actually for it to be resolved peacefully for both sides unless the equation is completely changed. Thank you very much, Dr. Harel Khoreb, for your comments, and thank you to our viewers. Don't forget to subscribe to us on all our media channels. Shalom.